Boards, and I want to thank you for taking time to join us for today's webinar entitled Top Grading: How to Fill Every Seat in Your Company with an A Player. During our presentation today, hopefully you'll learn how top grading works with examples on how to work with poor performers and B-level employees using an improvement plan. You're going to learn how to prepare a successful description for each key role in your company, and also sort of learn the top grading best practices for interviews and screenings. Chief Executive Boards is headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, with executive peer advisory boards in multiple cities throughout the United States. I'll be your host today, and so I'd like to ask you to stay tuned for future webinars on our website, which you can see located at the bottom of this slide. So before we dive straight into our main topic, you might be curious to learn more about CEBI. We are a boutique executive peer advisory service with local and national boards located throughout the eastern and Midwest cities in the United States. And really the purpose of CEBI is to help CEOs, presidents, business owners share ideas and experiences to really avoid the pitfalls and potholes that many people have experienced along the way. In other words, we help steer you from reinventing the wheel within your own business. Our members convene face-to-face in local forums and receive unvarnished advice in a safe and confidential environment that's typically unavailable elsewhere. It's kind of like having your own personal think tank. As an example, we address really what keeps you up at night, items that you don't really have an opportunity to discuss with anyone else. Members avail of local and national advisory board forums. They can attend educational summits, have access to other CEBI members, our libraries, our workshops, and webinars such as this, along with a host of other valuable services and content. So I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, questions, any questions that you have can be posted in the question box to your right, and they'll be answered after the webinar session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you for review on our website, and you'll also receive a link within a few days as well. So let's get started with our webinar on top grading. Today, our guest presenter is Ms. Sandy Blaha. She participates as a Chief Executive Board's International Advisor. She's also the founder and owner of Blaha Performance Consulting, which is a performance management, leadership development, and succession planning company based in Denver, Colorado. She specializes in building organization capacity with a focus on aligning people and strategy, execution, skills, and culture. So today, you're going to learn about how top grading helps you fill 90% of your seats with A players. The webinar will last approximately 45 minutes, and at the end, we'll take a few minutes for questions. Mine and Sandy's contacts will be listed at the end of the presentation. So if you want to get in touch with us, we invite you to contact us and ask any questions, or if you need any help with any details. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn the webinar over to our featured presenter, Ms. Sandy Blaha. Sandy?
Hey, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for joining us. And thanks to CEBI for the time to talk with you today about this game-changing tool. Oops. There we go. So Topgrading is a system that was popularized by Jack Welch at GE, but it was really developed and implemented by Jeff and Brad Smart. Now today's session is an overview of this system, and there's a lot. I'm so sorry. So this system has been around for a while. It's been utilized by a lot of great companies. And what we know is that it makes a really big difference in companies. So before we get started, I'm going to want you to participate a little bit today. And you have a raise your hand button on your control panel. And if you could just take a moment and see if you can locate that raise your hand button. That allows you to weigh in from time to time, and we'll stop and ask Robin what she sees on your screen. So first of all, my first question to you is how many of you have heard of Topgrading before? If so, would you please raise your hand?
Sandy, I have 4 people that said they have heard of Topgrading.
Great. Well, good. So I don't know how many have utilized it, but that would be a good discussion item at a upcoming meeting if there has been experience with it. So what we're going to do today is also discuss not only how to improve your workforce, but also how to improve your hiring process. One of the things that I would start with if I were you, if this is of interest to you, is to pick up the latest edition of Topgrading. And there's quite a bit of information out there. This may be a good place to start. They have the Topgrading system now is pretty much an online system, but it takes a while to learn about it. So you might want to pick up this publication. So let's talk about this adage: put your personnel work first, because it is the most important. Now, I'm coming from the point of view of 70% of most companies' operating costs are personnel related, but we don't treat it with the same type of, we don't treat the human resource as an item that can be fine-tuned to the extent that we could and should. And it is sort of the last frontier of competitive advantage. This is how people are outperforming their competition. So raise your hand if you live by this adage. You put your personnel work first because it's the most important. I'll give you just a second there.
Sandy, I have 3 hands.
Okay, good for you. I would love to have conversations with you, what you're doing and how you made that change. So let's move into the definition of what we mean when we say A player. An A player is one who qualifies among the top 10% of people available for a position. This is how Topgrading defines a high potential candidate. And I'd like all of you to have the success that you can achieve by using the Topgrading system and getting many more A players in your system. The reason this is a higher return on investment with A players is because A players, as you well know, significantly outproduce their average counterpart. Well, this is what most of us achieve. If we're lucky, 25% of our hires are A players, and then we have the 75% that are not, and we're disappointed and we're not getting the return on investment. We also know that these hiring mistakes cost us 5, depending on whose system you're using, 5 to 27 times salary. And in addition, you have wasted time cleaning up messes, and you may have lost clients, confidence, and of course a lot of time from owners, managers, and leaders. So what is the return on investment of hiring A players? Well, an A player performs better and is usually promoted faster, and they outperform their average peers by somewhere between 150 and 400%. They usually require a higher wage. However, because one A player often equals 1.5 to 2 average employees, in the long run it saves you money. And it saves you money in a lot of headaches as well because you have less stress. The more A players you have in your organization, the more A players you can attract, because A players want to work with other A players. And that includes their bosses, which is probably one of the bigger challenges. You're going to be able to create more shareholder value by having more A players in your company. So this is an exercise that you can think about in terms of your management and leadership teams. I want to give that frame around this conversation. Is think of your management and leadership team and ask yourself the question, what percentage of A players do you have? Are you getting what you expected and what you're paying for? Or are you able to move them from B plus to A players? Because it's the example that you set at the top that's most important. Then you might have some good, solid B players. You know, these are sort of our bread and butter people, the people that perhaps don't want to be A players, but they come and they produce every day. However, some of those B players may be able to become A players someday with a plan. So what's your percentage of B players? And then do you have any Cs, any chronic underperformers? This is how you measure your hiring success. And this is an analysis you should do every year before your annual strategic planning session or several times a year. And you should hold your hiring manager responsible, as well as your managers, to make sure that they are improving their workforce and that you have a pipeline of A players coming forward. Now, another thing that you can think about is what is the cost of your mishires? And I'm doing this to drive the point that most of us won't make change unless you really see the pain points, and it may be that you don't see them yet. So what you can think about is how many mishires did you have in the last 6 months to a year? What's the average cost of a mishire? And as I said, we're using the figure 5 to 27 times salary. And what are the wasted hours from the average mishire? And that usually has to do with the executives and managers. What workarounds have you had to do around mishires, and how much time has that cost you? So you can come to the bottom line, and on the Topgrading website, I believe there's a worksheet that you can pull off and get more information on this. In order for me to hire one A player, I typically incur X number of dollars in financial costs, and I waste X number of hours. Now, I'm preempting a conversation I'm going to have later. One of the things you do in Topgrading is you have a tandem interview when you're hiring. That is, 2 of your A players are spending 3 to 4 hours in an interview, and I'm going to walk you through that. But most people tell me, I don't have time to conduct tandem Topgrading interviews, but I am willing to waste the dollars and the hours that we just talked about. So I'm hoping to convince you that the return on investment of doing this more wisely is important, because we all know insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That came from Einstein. But I like the Winnie the Pooh, the Winnie the Pooh quote as well. It's painful to stay as is, and we only change if the pain is great enough or we have enough awareness. So I'm just going to remind you, 70% of your business expenses comprise of personnel expenses. And you want to fine-tune that expense and get the highest return on investment. So would you think about raising your hand right now to answer this question? Would it make a significant difference to your company's effectiveness if you hired or promoted or coached more A players, if you had more A players? Would it make a significant difference? So raise your hand if your answer is yes.
We have 11 responses, Sandy. Oh, make it 14.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so that was a bit of a teaching tool for me, is that we know if we sort of make commitments as we go through these conversations, we have a better chance of retaining the information, as well as acting on the information. So where are you going to start with this system? We're going to start digging into the actual specifics here. You want to identify your A players, your B players, and your C players at least twice a year. And the easiest way to do that is to do a bullseye. The C's are on the outside ring, the B's are in the middle ring, and the A's are in the middle. And you might want to destroy this piece of paper, be very careful. And I would start with your management and executive team. This may be an exercise you want to do on your own. And then later on, you might work with your managers to do the same thing for their direct reports. And this starts to drive some consciousness. It also starts the groundwork for the foundation for you starting to expect your managers to be conscious of moving people up. If you can't move a C to a B, then you'd be better off graduating them to the competition and starting over again, because people are disincentivized when they have to work with a C player because they feel like they're pulling too much weight. So the next thing you're going to do is make an action plan to move your C's to B's and your B's to A's. And as I said, not every B wants to become an A. We need lots of good, solid B's. But the more B pluses you have, the better. And you want to hold yourself accountable and your managers accountable for the percent of A players on their team. And later on, we'll talk about creating a network and a pipeline of potential hires of A players. We want to make sure your A players don't leave your company. And so you need to keep your entire company tuned up. So how many of you, would you raise your hand if you've identified your A, B, and C players and made improvement plans? Raise your hand if you've identified B and C players, A, B, and C players, and made improvement plans and coached performance.
Sandy, it looks like we have one person that has done that.
Yay! I want to talk to you too. Good for you, because you'll be a good role model for everybody else. Congratulations. So we'd love to hear from you. Maybe if we have time at the end, we could even open the mic, that one person that's done it. We'd love to hear from you what difference it's made in your company to have that kind of a focus. Okay. So the next thing you want to do is, once you know who's your C players and who's your B players, you want to create an improvement plan. And I selected this particular behavior change, and behaviors is usually what we're changing. I selected independent and dominant because most teams have struggled with people that are independent and dominant. We generally think of independent as very positive. However, independent players, they're lone wolves, and they often need to improve their ability to work on a team, to collaborate, to communicate with the team what they're doing, to provide structure, and to update others. So this improvement plan, any improvement plan can be very simple. Simple is better when you're learning a situation like that. So the improvement plan here is to ask one peer to give regular feedback from the team. So a regular feedback from that team from a team member regarding whether the person is becoming a better team player. I apologize. Hold on one second. I think our UPS person is at the door. Okay. Then the person is going to take interpersonal communication classes. They're going to practice active listening so that they're paying attention to what their team members are saying. And they're going to meet bi-monthly with a coach for advice, direction, and accountability. So you want to always coach the gap to bring a person from one level to the next, from a C to a B or a B to the A. First of all, you have to make the gap visible to that person. So the first thing you want to do is to clue into their career ambition. What do they really want? Can they see that if they don't improve, they're not going to be as satisfied in their work, as motivated? What would they like to accomplish in their career in the next 3 to 5 years? Then they're going to identify the gap in performance. Together, you might identify the gap in performance. And then you're going to meet regularly to make sure that you're reinforcing progress and accountability on these changes. You're going to feel, most people will not let go of people that are not performing in their jobs because they haven't done this work and they feel guilty, they feel compromised. So you want to mind the gap. That's why I put that little symbol in there. Maybe that'll help you. The next step in the process, and I know I'm covering a lot, and sure this is a high-level overview, but we want to take your recruiting and hiring process and make it more rigorous. And the way you obtain more A players is through a rigorous process. So you're going to create success description. You're going to recruit from networks. You're going to have candidates complete a career history form. You're going to conduct telephone screening interviews. You're going to do a tandem interview. And then you're going to make the go, no-go decision and have the candidate arrange reference checks. And this is information we're going to be going through step by step right now. Excuse me. So to improve hiring, you want to create success descriptions. And this is a little bit different. And what we find is that most job descriptions are vague. People really don't know how they're expected to perform from a job description because it covers everything. And that's probably important for your advertising and your hiring and for your legal records, but it doesn't help people understand what their expectations are in the job, and it doesn't help you hold them accountable. So this is a typical hiring description for a sales manager. They must be effective at capturing accounts, at closing business, communication, have a college degree, and have relevant experience. But what if we said instead that the sales and account manager was responsible for $500,000 in new work, bringing $500,000 in new revenues or work annually to the company, retaining 90% of clients, selling additional service to 70% of existing clients, developing at least one A-level talent in the sales force, updating the CRM system, keeping it up to date. That's something that most sales and account managers love to do. And that their team members would report that they share information well and collaborate. Now, would that help that person perform better because they could see exactly what is expected of them? So I sort of jumped to the end of the success description first, and I'm going to. But what I'm trying to show you is the bullseye of demonstrating to an employee what you expect of them, and then you can hold them accountable. And A players like knowing exactly what they're going to be held accountable for. So if we compare the usual hiring process to Topgrading, we have quite a few differences. And I'm not going to go into this in depth. You can take a look at it while I'm telling you a brief story. I worked with a company in 1997 that went from 17 to 75 people in 18 months. And they're a professional service company. So that's quite a bit of growth. What they didn't realize, and what I was able to point out to them, is they knew how to hire A players. And they had A players at every level in their company. So they, and the reason I learned this is that I did their client satisfaction interview for them. Excuse me. And they rated a 4.5 out of 5 on almost every scale. They might have had 1 4 in there. And so after I did that client satisfaction interview for them and presented the results, I said, what are you doing that you're so successful? I've never seen these kind of ratings. And we together determined that they had top-level personnel. Now, they live very close to they're in a university town, and I can see that might be a little bit easier for them to get those candidates. But they already had that competency within their company, and they've been able to build on it, and they're an extremely successful company. So when we are moving into our preparation for Topgrading, one of the things we do is the Topgrading system has 50 competencies listed. And for any one position, you're going to choose the top 8 to 10 competencies needed for success in that position. And then when you are interviewing and coaching people, you're going to continue to fine-tune the kinds of questions and results you get in these various areas. So I'm going to show you now these are competencies, and I'm going to show you a success description for the position of Chief Talent Officer. We want that person to have strong intellectual, personal, interpersonal management, leadership, and motivational skills. And one of the things you can do with your review process is to have that person rate themselves annually on these things, and you can provide your rating. And there you might have any gaps between your rating and their ratings that need to be addressed, or any weaknesses that might show up. So when we are doing the success description, these success descriptions are never more than a page long. The mission might include the challenge to grow and recognize our talent, to create and implement top grading practices, to develop the employment brand, the talent, succession planning, retention of top performers, accountability for top grading, and developing a leadership pipeline. There's a measurement here at the very top, which is how we could hold this person accountable. We want to pack the organization with superior talent and 80% A players in all jobs. Now that might be a long-range goal, something like 2 to 5 years, because it actually costs money to you have to change the way you look at your salaries a little bit to get A players in. You might have to pay a little more. So other metrics we might use for the Chief Talent Officer: the percent of A potentials hired and promoted in the last 5 years, the cost of mishires, the quality of external hires. 80% of A players are hired, and succession planning, that you have a whole pipeline of A players. So let me stop here and just prompt you, do you have any questions so far before we dig more deeply into recruitment? So remember, you've got a chat box, and you can open that. Is it a chat box or a question box?
It's a question box.
Question box, which you can type any questions in. So we'll just pause for a minute in case you have any questions about this.
Okay, Sandy, it looks like we have a question from Matthew.
Okay.
How do you use the success descriptions for key leadership team members?
You know, I believe that you want to start top grading, and Jeff Smart recommends this as well. You start top grading with your management and leadership team. So together, you might sit down and give everybody the mission in a team meeting. Sit down and ask them to write what they think the mission of their role is. Now, another word for mission is, what is the purpose? And that's a general overview of what is this position trying to accomplish. And of course, during different phases of growth, that might change. But currently, what is their mission? And then what are 2 or 3 metrics that they believe are the most important to be held accountable to? And then you can have a discussion amongst yourselves, or if you don't have the time, you might collect those from people. If you're the executive, you might review and comment on those, or have people send them to you so that you can review and comment. And then sit back down again and make sure that each of these is spot on. Now, what that's going to do for your management team is to help them be A players, because you might not have been that clear up to now. You might not have been that clear. This is your mission, and these are the metrics that we want to hold you accountable for. And that's essential, because if you're going to hire A players, they want to work for A players. But everybody needs to learn to be clear about expectations first, and then we can hold people accountable for those metrics. So excellent question. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay, Sandy, we do have a few more questions. Let's take one more now, and then we can take the rest at the end. This one is from Doug. Do people move down the scale, and do you share the competency ranking with individuals on your team that are trying to move up the scale?
Okay, let me take the first one. Do people move down the scale? I think your question may mean, do people lose motivation or lose performance capabilities? That's often a result of lack of clear expectations or lack of motivation on that person's part. So that's what I'm assuming you mean, is that they aren't doing as well. And I think if you go back to, I'm going to just go back a slide or two. If you take the the competencies for that position, because that's one thing you would eventually add to your success descriptions, is these competencies. And you sit down with each person and you have them rate themselves, and then you give them a rating, or I should say their boss, their superior gives them a rating. It gives you an excellent tool for discussion of improvement. Can you do me a favor, Robin, and the second part of that question, read it again, make sure see if I hit the nail on the head here.
Sure. Do you share the competency ranking with individuals on your team that you are trying to move up the scale?
Yes, I would do this together. I would have them do their rating, and then you do their rating, and you sit down and have a discussion, because this helps you to define the gaps. Remember this gap in performance we talked about. You want to define these gaps. So this is an excellent tool for doing this, and it's an excellent conversational and coaching tool. Okay, let's take the other questions a little bit later. Hopefully I hit that one and answered your question. All right, I'm going to go into recruitment now, and we're going to go in depth, and we have, I think, about 10 to 15 minutes. Is that correct? I don't want to. So
that's correct. Yes, we've got about 15 minutes.
Okay, great. So I'll try to cover this in about 10 minutes and leave about 5 minutes for questions. So your leadership pipeline is both internal and external. Who do you have within your organization? And of course, internal promotions tend to be some of the more effective. Who's a B that wants to be an A, and how can you move them to B+ this year? And move them and let them be available for future promotions. And then externally, you want to create this virtual bench, and as well, and that is by developing at least one, if not more, potential hires in each category. You can do that by attending conferences and industry committees, by talking and noticing, talking to people and noticing who is really, who's got the spark, who's got the energy, the motivation, the ambition, and the skill sets that you might need, giving them your card, and finding a way to stay in touch with them, perhaps on a monthly basis. Just checking in with them. You're starting to create a connection between you and your company. You can also look at recently licensed personnel in your field. You can look at almanacs of student awards. But you want to do this both internally and externally. The mistake that's often made is that we're not doing this as rigorously internally as externally, and then people feel passed over because they haven't had opportunities. In terms of the rigorous recruiting and hiring process, this is very thorough. It is a how-to process. It's almost prescriptive, and it works. My clients know that I love to bring you systems that work and that improve your bottom line, and we're going to go through these, not all in depth, but we're going to give you some highlights. So let's say that you are looking to fill a new position. You might have 150 resumes, and from that, call 30 resumes that look promising, and then select perhaps the top 5 to 8, and you're going to do telephone screenings. You're going to spend about 45 minutes on the phone with an individual. Now, because you're doing telephone screenings, you might be able to get down to 1, 2, or 3 interviews. I said 4 on this inverted pyramid, but less is better. because you want to spend about 3 hours minimum with your candidates, and you're going to have 2 of your top performers in your company conducting that interview, and you're going to want to instruct them on the process. And then you're going to have candidate-arranged reference checks, which take about 20 minutes per person. So what I'm saying here is that you're going to spend more time with less people because your process is rigorous on the front end. Every candidate not only gives you a resume, but those top 8 people that you're going to be doing phone screens with are each going to complete a career history form. This is a very detailed report for every job where a title has changed. You're going to ask questions like, how would your supervisor rate your overall performance? Excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. And you're going to ask them to explain that, okay? And you can see there's a lot more information asked for here than you would usually see. So there would be pages of career history that you would be getting on all of the positions that the person has filled in the last 10 to 15 years. Then you're going to complete a telephone screening. And here's just a brief sample questions, okay? Throughout this process, we use what is called TORC, and you can see TORC at the bottom, threat of reference check. So you can always say, hey, when we check with your last 5 bosses, how would each of them rate your performance on a scale of 1 to 10? And this is a process you keep up throughout. And the biggest complaint or concern I get from people as they start thinking about using the system is, aren't people going to be afraid? Aren't they going to not want to do all these things? Complete a detailed career history form. Talk about how their bosses would rate them. This is a different type of process. And what we know is that your B+ and A players are not intimidated. They're actually excited by the rigor. And I've had this conversation over and over again after I've taught my clients how to use Topgrading, is they said they loved the interview process because it was rigorous, because it was more in-depth. Your B and C players will, your B- and C players will crack underneath this and not want to complete it, and we want to interview them anyway. So again, the reason we're using our A players in the company to do the tandem interview, spend 3 to 4 hours, is because we want the smartest people. They're going to be able to recognize talent in other people. So here's my question to you, and I want you to raise your hand. If you have someone in your company who has excellent success in hiring A players, so raise your hand if you have someone at your company who is excellent in hiring A players or finding A players for your company. Robin, what do we have?
It looks like we have about 3 participants that have someone with that capability.
Wonderful. You want to free up a little bit of that person's time, hopefully, to spend more time with your hiring process. Not everybody can develop this capability, but you're going to want to use those people in your tandem interview process. So the tandem interview is 2 interviewers, both A players. They take their time with a chronological overview of the person's education, all of their full-time jobs, their successes and failures and key decisions, key relationships, and then you dig into the competencies questions. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. We use the TORC process, the threat of reference check, to help the candidates be more honest, to give them some truth serum. And the reason we spend 3 to 4 hours is because most people cannot keep up a facade for that period of time. So candidates are honest in their answers, knowing they will personally be arranging calls with their former bosses and asking for a personal reference. The benefit is you get an entire career rather than the candidate just telling you what they want you to hear. You're going to do the usual things, build a little bit of rapport. You're going to let the person know ahead of time that they're going to be spending 3 or 4 hours with you. You're going to, of course, tell them a little bit about your company and review some of the company's goals, and then talk about their long-range plan, and then let them know that you want to thoroughly understand them, which is why you're going to take this time. You're going to dig into the competencies, and most people have integrity as one of these competencies, and you can see the questions that we ask are quite different. What are a couple of the most courageous actions or unpopular stands you have taken? And you can ask, what was the result of that? Have you had to confront unethical behavior or chosen not to say anything in order not to rock the boat? How do you handle unethical behavior? These are not yes, no questions. They're open-ended. And you're not falling in love with a candidate because you like them. You are doing a thorough analysis. The last question I like a lot, too, under what circumstances have you found it justifiable to break a confidence? We're trying to really dig in and get to know this person and how they think and how they make decisions. So then once you've decided, you're going to be telling this person a couple of times throughout the interview that they will be arranging reference checks. And part of your question will be to ask them how their bosses would rate them on the most important competencies or the most important behaviors for that job. So there's a lot on the screen. You can take your time to read it. In order to receive a job offer, that person is going to be arranging the reference checks, and you're going to end your interview with the self-appraisal, describing your strengths and weaknesses in detail, and goals for the next job. When you do the reference check, each of the interviewers will call a few of the references, and the references are selected by you, and they're usually bosses of the person or key relationships. And here's a script for that. And again, you see how would you rate their overall performance in that job. The person might have said something like, it's the last bullet here, the person mentioned that they struggled in their job with X. Can you tell me about that? So you're spending some time with those reference checks. And then you're going to do an executive summary of each person. What we know and what Brad Smart has proven is that research shows that gut feel without careful systematic analysis leads to mishires. The thorough analysis is what you want. We don't want just people that can show us a nice face when they're interviewing or are good at interviewing. We want people that can do the job. And that's when you start wooing the candidate. That's when you start, once you know you've got to go, a couple potential goes. And what I mean by this is who's your go candidate, who's your no-go candidate. And the 1 or 2 go candidates you start wooing. Both of them may not say yes, and realize that A players are in high demand, so you have to be able to move pretty fast. So the more practice you have with tandem interviews and the top grading process, the better you'll get at recognizing and hiring A talent. Once you've got that A player on board, you want to make sure you retain them, okay? So you want your onboarding process to be very productive. You want early development of your new hires. You want a high percent of A players at your company because A players want to work with other A players. They do not want to work with C players. You want to make sure they have greater job satisfaction. So within 2 weeks of the hire, we suggest that you review your executive summary regarding their strengths and weaker points, and you start immediately on their improvement plan. And again, this sets up accountabilities. And so remember that retention of new hires is essential, and that you want to top grade your senior management team. What we know is 80% of people leave their jobs voluntarily, that leave their jobs voluntarily do so because they don't like working for their boss. So it's good to start with your senior executive team. You know, we're on the planet, and we're on the planet to grow, to learn, to be better people, and this top grading system helps all of us get better, and that's an exciting enterprise. So let me know if I can be of help to you in this process. And Kevin, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. At this point, this really concludes the presentation portion. We'll entertain a few questions from the audience, and I want to remind you that this is being recorded and will be sent out in the form of a web link via email. Any questions at this point? Robin, do we have any questions in the queue?
We do, Kevin and Sandy. We actually have a very interesting one from Bob. His question is, have you done any top grading with manufacturing organizations who have unions involved?
No, I do not have experience with that. And that would be a conversation. I don't think it would be impossible to do. In fact, I think that doing those self-ratings and the ratings that you would do, the supervisor, manager, would give that person would actually give you better data and to support any decisions that you would have to make if the person is unionized. I have worked in manufacturing firms. I haven't worked in a unionized manufacturing firm. But I think the more data you have, the clearer your expectations are, the more solid ground you are on, the better foundation you have to take action.
Okay, and we have one final question, and it is from Casey. It says, besides purchasing the book that you mentioned, are there any other ways to learn or utilize the top grading system?
Yes, depending on the size of your organization, there used to be, and I believe there still is, a training program that your personnel, a person can go to learn this program. I believe they still do that workshop. And then there are online tools. I don't believe you can use this tool without reading the book first. I generally, because the size of companies that I work with are sort of 20 to 75 person firm, that I can also coach it once the person has read the book. I sit down, I help people learn the whole process, I go through an interview with them, and then they pretty much get it and can do it on their own. So several ways to do that. That's a great question. Thank you. Anything else?
That's
Any
it.
other questions, Robin?
That's it.
Okay. All right. This webinar was hosted by Chief Executive Boards, and I want to invite you to visit our website for additional insights and upcoming events, such as the webcast that you see listed on this slide. So come October the 21st, we're going to have another webinar on sales mastery, and this will be the second segment to our first webinar that we held a couple of months ago on sales mastery. January the 20th, we're also going to do one on risk mitigation, and there will be others to follow. So at this point, I'd like to thank our presenter, Sandy Blaha, and I hope that you have found this to be helpful. I want to invite you to contact Chief Executive Boards with any questions, or Sandy Blaha, and you can reach us at this email address or phone number, and I hope that you'll please join us for future webinars. Thank you, and have a good day. I'm sorry, it's somebody else.
Thank you, Kevin, and I apologize for my dog barking.
Oh, no worries, Sandy. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.